morning, afternoon, or evening is going very well. For today's video, I thought that we could do a little bit of textbook reading. Now, as you may know, I am a theater major. So this will be from my acting theater textbook. So yeah, I find these videos relaxing where it's just kind of reading and stuff, so I thought we could do that today. So I'm going to be looking down so that I can read, but don't worry, I'm still paying attention to you. Alright. So, this is introductory material to theater in early modern Europe. In London, Paris, and Madrid, theater and drama experienced a second renaissance in the later 17th century. In these cities, the theater came under the influence and protection of the king and his court, and the theaters of both London and Paris adapted Italian staging practices, as did the theaters of the Spanish court. As scenic technology became increasingly complex and spectacular, theater buildings achieved the form they would hold well into the 19th century, and the work of new playwrights and new dramatic designs invigorated the dramatic repertoire. Yet, for all their similarities, the theaters of Restoration England of Louis the XIV, took me a minute to translate the Roman numerals. Meredith, I'm busy. I'm so sorry, guys. Meredith is interrupting. Meredith is my cat. Yes, my channel is named after her. She's very precariously walking along the back of my desk. Meredith, go lie down, please. She can't even hear me, probably. Well, I'm sure she can hear me. Cats have good hearing, but she's worrying me. Alright, where were we? The theaters of Restoration England, of Louis XIV's France, and of the Spanish Golden Age were sustained by very different social and political climates. In France, Louis XIV declared "L'État, c'est moi," I am the state. In 1600, confidently drawing all state authority into the person of the king and his magnificent court. The later 17th century in France was a period of royal absolutism, as the throne worked to consolidate its power. In England, conditions were very different, for 1600 brought the restoration of the monarchy, which had to negotiate its authority with a still powerful parliament, which gradually gained control of many royal prerogatives. The religious issues surrounding the succession of the English monarch remained a divisive problem throughout the period as well. In both countries, the theater became associated with the throne and reflected the tensions animating social and political life. In France, a character in Molière's play Tartuffe drew the official portrait of the absolute monarch, a prince who sees into our inmost hearts and can't be fooled by any trickster's arts. Yet, the authoritarian policies of the French government, the internecine competition among members of the court, and even the fortunes of the theater suggest that the king's claim of absolute power was challenged in a variety of ways. Under Louis XIII's and Louis XIV's, the crown strove to centralize its power by crushing the claims of the landed nobility much rule in a series of costly wars. I need a sip of water. Let's see. Since Louis XIII came to the throne at the age of 9, can you imagine? When his father, Henry IV, was assassinated, much of this expansion was carried on by his chief minister, Cardinal Richelieu, and Richelieu's successor, Cardinal Mazarin. The suppression of the traditional nobility was achieved largely through Richelieu's formation of a new bureaucracy loyal to the crown, partly composed of politically active clergy and partly of commoners promoted over the heads of the nobility to critical positions in the government. Allowing these new men to buy aristocratic titles, the crown raised money and further diluted the power of the nobility. The crown's ravenous appetite for cash to pay for the lavish life of the court and for expensive building projects, such as the Palace of Versailles, further weakened the nobility and alienated the peasantry. Using tax farmers who paid a fixed sum to the government in exchange for the authority to collect taxes and pocket the excess as profit, the crown squeezed the nobles' wealth directly into the royal coffers, impoverishing their lands and making the peasantry increasingly rebellious. A poor and disaffected peasantry, a jealous aristocracy, an upstart bourgeoisie, and an increasingly authoritarian and isolated monarchy. This became the recipe for revolution. Although the French Revolution did not erupt until 1789, France suffered civil convulsions throughout the 17th century that dramatized the tension between Louis's absolutist rhetoric and the political realities of his reign. The nobles led a series of rebellions called the Fronde throughout the 1640s and 1650s in an effort to unseat Louis and his powerful ministers. Louis defeated these uprisings and finally sealed the fate of his enemies when he required the nobility to attend him at Versailles so he could keep his eye on their activities. However, the Fronde was part of a more pervasive unrest. Relentless taxation, economic stagnation, and repeated famines throughout the 17th century made the peasants angry as well, and peasant riots and rebellions took place in nearly every province of France in nearly every decade of the century. Finally, Louis XIV also had difficulty with the most volatile issue of the 17th century Europe: religious dissent. The close ties between the crown and the church often resulted in the suppression of Protestant sects, particularly the Calvinist French Huguenots. This is more history than theater, I suppose, at least in this section, but the theater part is coming up. Protestant rebellion had forced the enactment of the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting the Huguenots considerable religious freedom. Louis XIV revoked the edict in 1685, giving the government wider latitude to suppress increasingly energetic religious protest. Louis XIV carefully crafted the image of Le Roi Soleil, the Sun King, whose absolute authority seemed almost a force of nature, not a fact of politics. Throughout his reign, though, Louis had to contend with the recalcitrant factions who refused to accept completely his characterization of the king's power. In England, resistance to the royal authority had been much more successful. Between 1603 and 1642, the Stuart kings, James I and his son Charles I, worked to limit the power of Parliament and to enforce increasingly strict religious laws that suppressed the Protestant Puritan sects and demanded conformity with the Church of England. In 1642, Parliament passed legislation limiting the powers of the Church of England. In 1642, Parliament passed legislation limiting the powers of the throne, and civil war between parliamentary and royalist forces erupted. Charles I was executed in 1649. His wife and children, including the future king, Charles II, escaped to France. From 1653 to 1658, Oliver Cromwell served as Lord Protector of the realm, but royalist sentiments eventually prevailed and established Charles II on the throne. Although the monarchy was restored, the term restoration refers generally to the period beginning with the reign of Charles II and extending to the end of the 17th century. Charles II was in no position to command the nation, and English politics in the later 17th century mainly concerned the negotiation of power between the crown and Parliament. Charles's death in 1685 spurred a crisis in that his son James II was Catholic and threatened to compromise English religious and civil autonomy from the Catholic Church and the Catholic states of Europe. In 1689, Parliament effectively deposed James, inviting his Protestant daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange to return to England and assume the throne. While Louis XIV increasingly insisted on autonomous power of the throne in France, the Parliament in England finally achieved a lasting compromise with the crown in the form of a constitutional monarchy. In bringing William and Mary into power, Parliament gained the authority of consent over royal succession, a power it confirmed in 1702, in naming the daughter of James II, Anne, as successor. While in an important sense, the gulf separating French and English culture has always been narrow and deep like the English Channel, Spanish culture in the Renaissance arises from a very different history. Spain was occupied by Muslim and Arab invaders from North Africa, then known as the Moors, in 711, and is still marked by its 5 centuries of Islamic culture. In 1479, Ferdinand of Aragon and Isabella of Castile were married, forming the alliance that gave rise to modern Spain. In 1480, they joined forces with the Catholic Inquisition, expelling Jews from the country. At the conquest of Granada in 1492, the Moors were finally driven out of Spain. Having formed a single state, the Spanish monarchy successfully expanded its reach into the global empire of the 16th and 17th centuries. Under Charles V, Spain's territory included many New World colonies, as well as the Netherlands and the Holy Roman Empire of Central Europe, and the culture of the Spanish court was unrivaled in Europe. This was the era of Cervantes and Calderon, Velázquez and El Greco. During the reign of Philip II, however, Spain's domination of Europe began to wane. Spain became involved in a brutal and expensive effort to retain control of the Netherlands, a hotbed of Protestant resistance. English soldiers, Sir Philip Sidney and Ben Jonson, among others, fought the Spanish in the Netherlands, and Philip tried in several ways to outmaneuver the English. He proposed marriage to Queen Elizabeth, but as with other suitors, she strung him along for political purposes and finally refused him. He also mounted a massive naval invasion of England, the Spanish Armada of 1588, which was surprisingly defeated. Spain continued to wane in the 17th century, eventually losing the Netherlands and losing Portugal in 1657. By 1665, Spain was ruled by the last of the Habsburg kings, the deformed imbecile. Darn, that's rude. Charles II. The death of Charles II drew all of Europe into the wars of the Spanish succession. Louis XIV's familiar sobriquet, Le Roi Soleil, derives from a role he played in a court ballet devised for him in 1653. A fine dancer, Louis sponsored and took part in a wide variety of entertainments. Moreover, the centralization of power in the king and the court paralleled the increasing institutionalization of the arts under Louis XIV as a means of advancing his own prestige and keeping control over potentially seditious activities. The most famous of these institutions, the Académie Française, was chartered in 1637 and used by Cardinal Richelieu to evaluate a critical controversy surrounding Pierre Corneille's play, The Cid. Corneille's detractors had sharply attacked the play, and Richelieu urged the Academy to resolve whether The Cid could legitimately be described as effective tragedy in neoclassical terms. In return, Richelieu promoted the Academy and its aims, the purification of French language and literature, and the advancement of official French culture. Louis XIV assumed the role of official protector of the Académie Française in 1672 and sponsored other institutions as ornaments to his reign. The Académie Royale des Musiques, the Académie Royale des Peintures et des Sculptures, the Académie des Inscriptions, the Académie des Sciences, and the Académie des Architecture. The institution of the stage was no exception. Theatrical companies had always needed the king's license to play in Paris, and Louis licensed several companies and named Molière's company as the Troupe du Roi, after Molière's death in 1673. The leading tragic actress in Paris, Mademoiselle Champmeslé, joined with Molière's troupe and gained the king's patronage. The new company, the Comédie Française, opened in August of 1680. It held a monopoly on the production of all spoken French drama, and although this monopoly has long since vanished, the Comédie Française remains the principal company performing the classical French repertoire. Alright, y'all. I think I'm going to stop this video here, but please let me know if you enjoyed it and would like to see more videos in this style. I hope you all are feeling sleepy and relaxed, and I will see you all in my next video. Please feel free to drop a comment with any of your thoughts, especially including any suggestions or requests, and I will see you all next time. Bye, guys.